Hola, buenos días. Les habla Carles Gaju, gerente de distribución institucional, y en nombre de Vice les doy la bienvenida a nuestro webinar. Hoy nos acompaña John Patrick Lee, Product Manager de ETFs, y Ed López, Head of ETF Product. Ellos estarán a cargo de la exposición de hoy, eSports, el futuro del entretenimiento y competición, donde expondrán acerca de la industria del eSports global, su irrupción en el deporte, competición y entretenimiento de grandes audiencias, así como las perspectivas del mercado y las oportunidades de inversión que permite el ETF VanEck Vectors Video Gaming and eSports. Al final de la exposición tendremos tiempo para conversar con John Patrick y con Ed, por lo que pueden ir escribiendo sus preguntas en el chat y después las revisaremos. También les vamos a mostrar un código QR para que lo puedan escanear y nos ayuden a contestar una breve encuesta. Para nosotros es muy importante conocer sus opiniones y así ir mejorando nuestros webinars. Welcome, John and Ed. Thank you for being with us today. You have our full attention. Please, Ed, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to speak to you this morning. My colleague and I, John Patrick, we refer to him as JP. We will talk about video gaming and esports, and much more than just an industry built around video gaming. We believe it really is taking entertainment to the next level. I think what you'll find today is that it's beginning to disrupt the media and entertainment landscape, and we'll talk a little bit about why we believe that's the case. Let's move on to the next slide, and if I may just spend a few minutes, I'll introduce you to VanEck in case you are not familiar with VanEck. We are a global asset manager. We were established in 1955, and our core mission really is to try to identify forward-looking intelligent solutions that add value to clients' portfolios. In 1955, we launched one of the first mutual funds to target gold mining companies. We have since extended our product lineup with many firsts and now cover a wide range of asset classes, including very thematic strategies such as video gaming and esports. If we go on to the next slide, we are a privately held company. We manage money on a global level, currently 56 billion in assets globally. We have a thriving ETF business in the US, one in Europe via the UCITS structure, and in Australia, as well as mutual fund offerings. As you see on this slide, we have exposure to a lot of different asset classes and provide opportunities. I think one of the ways you can think about VanEck is providing unique exposures to different areas of the market, perhaps ways that would help improve your investment performance or provide a different perspective in terms of the way that you get exposure. If we move on to the next slide, we'll get right into it and talk about why we're here. We're talking about a pretty hot thematic that's in the marketplace today. It's video gaming, and what most people have heard of recently is esports. I'm going to bring in JP now, and we're going to tee up what we're going to talk about today. And what I think you'll find is, video gaming as an industry, it's not just child's play. It is a very, very big business. JP, look, we're looking at revenues of currently 159 billion that are expected in 2020.
Yeah, $159 billion are expected to be made in this industry this year. And I think that surprises a lot of people right off the bat. I don't think most people understand how big the industry is. And just off the top of my head, I mean, it's bigger than the robotics industry, and it's also bigger than the cybersecurity industry. So this is kind of a huge sleeper group of companies that are working on kind of in the same sphere. And they've been able to grow their revenues for a number of reasons, but one of them is they're really willing and able to try new business models to publish their games. So we're going to get into this later, but an example of that is the game as a service model, which is essentially a free video game. So it's a free game, and people get into the ecosystem, and then they're spending money in the ecosystem, and it's a game changer, and it's really leading to a lot of huge revenue numbers for some of these big games.
That's right. And I think a service or a game as a service, that type of business model wouldn't be possible without the technological innovations that we'll talk about as well that have helped create better, more immersive games and faster connections between players that only help to facilitate greater engagement and longevity of a game.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really get into this that much, but the idea that you can buy a game or purchase items in a game while you're playing through your computer, you don't have to go to Toys R Us, you don't have to go to Target, you can do it while you're sitting on the couch. That is a game changer. And the other tech innovation that we like to talk about is the fact that these companies are, again, they're willing and able to try new things, and they embrace new technology. So a great example of that is mobile gaming. Mobile gaming is now the largest and fastest growing segment out of all the video game segments there are. And it's just, mobile gaming wasn't around 15 years ago. So it's a great example of these companies being willing and able to push the envelope in terms of what technology they're using to distribute their products.
And then probably the part of video gaming that a lot of people have heard about more recently is eSports. It's just burst onto the scene, and it's really brought video gaming, as we say here, to the forefront of cultural consciousness. JP, can you talk about eSports in the context of the broader video game space?
Yeah, so everybody loves talking about eSports. It's a great, it's a big hype. It's a hype kind of situation, and I love that. But it's good to keep perspective. And what I mean by that is the eSports revenues are nowhere near as big as the broader industry revenues. So we see it as kind of an industry within an industry. Esports is a smaller industry within the broader video game industry. But something we really like to talk about is the fact that the publishers who publish the games are now kind of in the driver's seat, and they're in control of the majority of the revenues being made in the esports space. And that's because they are now launching and running their own leagues around titles, which is different than how it used to be. So that we'll get into that. That's a very exciting topic.
And now with the advent of COVID-19 and work from home and self-quarantine, obviously you may have seen stock prices and this industry really take off. But one of the things that we look at before we launch a new strategy is to make sure that we feel comfortable that it is a long-term trend, not just a fad. And I think you will learn today that we believe that there is a demographic and a cultural shift happening that helps support this thesis or this industry.
Yeah, for sure. So video games have had a great year this year so far. Compared to the broad market, things are looking good. And one of the questions we get is, well, isn't that going to go away when the COVID, when the virus disappears and people start going back outside and start going back to sports events and stuff like that? And yeah, I would say maybe, but I think the bigger issue is that there are these big picture trends that are happening and that were in place before COVID, right? So you've got consumer demand for online interactive entertainment, and you see that with the popularity of social media. So people want to be online and they want to be hanging out and interacting with each other online. In a lot of ways, the new most popular video games mimic social media. People are joining the game and hanging out with their friends, having conversations, goofing around, doing whatever they want to do, and it's happening within the game universe. So games are really latching onto that phenomenon. The second thing is media, the fragmentation of media. So you could think of that as cord cutting. So now you have the option to say, I'm not going to have a cable package. I'm not going to spend $100 on a cable package. I'm going to spend $10 on my Hulu subscription, $10 on my Netflix subscription, and then I'm going to spend $10 on my League of Legends Battle Pass, or my Fortnite Battle Pass, or my Call of Duty monthly subscription, or whatever it is. And people are bucketing their video game spend into their entertainment spend, and the way they're setting it up, it it feeds into that subscription service, just like Hulu and Netflix. So the companies are aware of these big picture trends, and they're trying to leverage them to drive revenues. And then the final one is demographics, which is something we're all kind of aware of in our daily life, is that people are getting, as younger people grow older, the younger generations, they're what they call digital natives, right? The younger people today, they grew up playing on tablets, playing on iPhones. I've got some nieces and nephews who are 4 years old. They always want to be on their mom's, iPhone playing the games and stuff like that. And so as time moves on, those younger generations, they're going to continue to play games. They're going to continue to be engaged in the video game environment. And that group is also more prone to do the first two things. They're more prone to be cord cutters. They're more prone to, and they're more prone to be on social media. So it's like this perfect storm where these big picture trends are happening and changing our society. And the video game industry is just kind of sitting right in the middle. So there's these big things supporting the movement. It's not just happening in a bubble, and it didn't come out of nowhere.
Right. So let's delve into some of this a little bit. Starting out, we've already got a slide up on video games, our big business. And JP, maybe perhaps you can provide some detail around this, but the way I see it is video games, it's a big established industry with looks like pretty decent growth rates, and there are new channels of growth.
Right. So, the top line numbers we went over earlier, $159 billion this year. And that comes from a variety of different sources. That revenue includes a game publisher revenue, or, the chips that are used to facilitate gameplay, like semiconductor chips that are being bought by the console makers. So there's a whole bunch of different buckets of revenues that are being compiled to create this top line number. But I think the big takeaway is that it's a big number, and it's been growing steadily and consistently for many, many years. And one of the ways that they're doing this, and we touched on it a little bit, is the game as a service model. So let's dig into the game as a service model. The old video game model is game as a product. It's a game as a product is when the new Mario Kart comes out this year, and if you want to buy the new Mario Kart, you have to drive down to Toys R Us or Walmart or Target or whatever, and you're going to spend $50 on the Mario Kart. It's a one-time transaction. Nintendo is going to make one $50 revenue purchase from you, unless you buy the game again or lose it or want to buy it for one of your friends, right? So under the new model is game as a service. There is no entry fee. So a game as a service game is, let's look at Fortnite. Fortnite is one of the most successful games of all time, and it's a free game. It's free. Anybody on this call right now can go online and download Fortnite and play it for free. In 2018, Fortnite made $2.4 billion, which was the most of any video game made in a single year. And it's a free game. How do they make their money? They make their money through smaller in-game transactions. So instead of that $50 spend or the $60 spend to get in the door, you come in for free. And then once you're in and you're like, whoa, I love this game. I love jumping around and playing this game. It's really fun. Then you see other people like, well, wait a minute, this guy's got a Spider-Man costume. I want to dress like Spider-Man in the game. So then how much does that cost? It's only $5. I've got $5 to spend on a Spider-Man costume. So it's the smaller transactions, and it really does two things. Number one, it increases the life cycle of the game, because once everybody buys Mario Kart for the first time, nobody's going to buy it again, right? But you can potentially keep Fortnite going for a decade. If they keep coming out with tweaking the game or changing this or changing that, changing the map, Fortnite could potentially be here for 10 years. So because so it extends the amount of time that the game can be on the shelf, and the publisher can be making money from it. And the second thing it does is it increases the amount of revenue that's coming from a single customer. So again, $50 for Mario Kart versus Fortnite, you could potentially spend $500 or $1,000 on Fortnite this year. Because look, I got the Spider-Man costume, but now I want the Thor costume, or I want the Freddy Krueger costume, or whatever it is, right? So it's a really innovative way to boost revenues. And so what happened was, and it didn't start with Fortnite. Fortnite is just the best case example of how popular and how big of an idea this is. But once other companies said, well, wait a minute, this is a great idea, everybody's it's like a gold rush, right? Everybody's trying to release their free game. So all the publishers out there, they've got their normal game as a product games that they're trying to sell for 60, 70 bucks. But now they're saying, wait, we get this new idea, let's do this. And it's taking off across, a number of publishers have released free-to-play game as a service games. So it's an interesting business model. And I think the big takeaway is that these companies as a group, they're very, very willing to try new things. And then when it works, they're saying, wait, this works, let's go full steam ahead. And that's what we're seeing with this game as a service model.
Yeah, I mean, game as a service is a perfect example. But if we move on to the next slide, let's talk about how they have diversified their business. Game as a service is one channel of potential revenue for a publisher, but they still have the console games, right, JP? And then now they're looking at mobile as well, and now eSports comes into the picture.
Yeah, so when you think about the video game market, it's helpful to think about it the same way you would think about like the financial services market. Like if you're in a financial services business, you have these different channels, right? You've got your institutional channel, you've got your retail channel, you've got your private bank channel, you've got your wirehouse channel, your financial advisor channel. There's all these different channels, and you're trying to reach into each one of them, and each one of them maybe has a different strategy or a different business model for that specific channel. It's the same thing in the video game industry. So we can think about the channels as you've got your PC channel, your personal computer, which is when you play your game on your computer. You've got your console channel, which is your Xbox, your PlayStation, and your Nintendo, things like that. And then now you've got this mobile channel, which really came out of nowhere. Think back 15 years ago. I mean, the iPhone came out in 2007, and the iPhone really facilitated the fact that everybody's now got these phones in their hands, and they have the ability to be playing games on them. So in the 13 years or so since the iPhone came out, the dark blue on the left chart, the dark blue, the 40%, and if you include tablet games too, which is like iPad, that group is the biggest and fastest growing channel for these companies. And it shows, again, it goes back to game as a service. It's a willingness to try new things and embrace new technology. And that's something that these companies have always really been able to do. And it's because they're, it's a classic stereotype of a video game nerd. These quote video game nerds, they love technology, they love being on their computers. So when a new technology comes out, what happens is they all say, well, how are we going to use this cool new technology to make a game? How are we going to facilitate this new graphics or whatever it is into a game scenario? So over the last 10, 15 years, mobile has been a huge success. Right now, what they're working on is cloud gaming. So cloud gaming is when you don't need to buy a PC, you don't need to buy an Xbox. All you need is an internet connection and a browser, and then the game processing is being done offsite. It's the same thing as cloud computing, right? The servers that are run by Google or Amazon, whoever the cloud provider is, they're doing all the heavy lifting for the game. And so all you need to do is plug in your laptop. You don't need a great laptop. You just need some rinky-dink laptop, and then you're playing a game with all your friends. So that's what's happening right now. So in 10 years or 15 years, I would expect this chart on the left to have a big, a chunk of cloud gaming revenues, because it's happening in real time, right? So Google Stadia came out last year, and it did not come out successfully. The game, it wasn't ready. There weren't enough games on the platform, and the technology was a little glitchy. So it was like, let's call it not a huge success. But it just, again, it goes back to the willingness to try new things. We're gonna keep pushing, and we're gonna make this work, because the technology is there theoretically. They just have to bridge the gap and make it real.
And then so let's talk a little bit about esports, because that's where a lot of media attention has been spent. That's where you see some fantastic things happening, like stadiums being, well, prior to COVID, being sold out to live events to go watch people play video games. talk about that revenue stream as it applies to the publishers or
Yeah.
or the industry, the ecosystem.
Okay, so let's look at the publishers, right? So let's rewind 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The esports leagues were independently owned and operated by third parties. So if I want to start an esports league, I'm going to pay Activision. I'm going to pay them $1 million. And I'm going to say I'm going to use Call of Duty for this esports league. I'm going to try to create a league. So they're paying Activision for the rights to use the game, and then they're going to try to make as much profit as they can through media rights or sponsorship or merchandise, advertising, et cetera, et cetera. So they're going to try to basically create a self-sustaining league and try to skim money at the top. The publishers said to themselves, why is this guy making money on my game? This is my game. I created it. I own it. I don't want to give this guy, this third-party publisher person, any of my revenues or introduce him into my ecosystem. It's my stuff. So what they have done is launch their own leagues. So you got, Activision is a leading innovator in this. So they launched the Overwatch League. They launched the Call of Duty League. And to if you're a team and you want to play in the Overwatch League, in the Activision Overwatch League, you have to pay Activision $20 to $30 million just to have a seat at the table, just to have a team in the league. And then from there, Activision is getting a cut of your revenues. So let's say you make $5 million off, you had a great season, you won a bunch of tournaments and, yada, yada. Activision's going to actually get a cut of your revenues because it's their league. So what they have effectively done is taken ownership of the majority of the revenues coming from the esports ecosystem. So and media rights is a huge part of this. Okay, so media rights is when a company like, there are these websites like Twitch TV, Huya and Duya in China, Modern Times Group, a number of streaming websites, and that's where the majority of the action is. That's where people go to watch esports and watch video games. So the media rights essentially when the Twitch TV says, I'm going to pay Activision $90 million for the rights to exclusively stream the tournaments that these are coming from. So the media rights right now are 23% of the 23% of the revenues. That media rights, those are expected to grow to upwards of 40%. So because the publishers own the league and they own the game, they own the whole pie basically. And that's something that people ask us a lot. How do you get invested in esports? How do we get invested in esports? And I just say, look, let's just focus on the publishers. They own everything. They own the game. And that's another thing that happens too. It's like a halo effect. So last summer in 2019, there was a Fortnite World Cup tournament here in New York City. And the winner of the tournament, he won $3 million for winning this tournament, right? So this person won $3 million. Just to put that in perspective, Tiger Woods, he won the Masters last year. He won the golf tournament, the Masters. He won like $2.1 million. So the Fortnite tournament winnings is bigger than what Tiger Woods is winning. So what does that do, right? That creates an enormous buzz around this game. It was a front page news story for 2 to 3 weeks here in New York. It was the front of the New York Times, front of Wall Street Journal. I mean, it was a global phenomenon. And then the person won $3 million. So what does that do, like in the social media ecosystem or just the broader media ecosystem? It creates this huge buzz effect. And then what happens? There are all these people in the world who are saying, well, wait a minute, this person won $3 million. He plays Fortnite. I want to play Fortnite too. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to go online and I'm going to say, well, how much does Fortnite cost? And then it goes back to the business model. Fortnite is free. So it's like this positive feedback loop where you've got excitement from the esports tournaments. People get interested in the game. The game is free. And then the game is creating all these in-game revenues because once you start playing it, you're having a fun time and you're hanging out with your friends. So then what does that do? It gets more people introduced to the game and into the game. So it's this virtuous positive feedback loop that ultimately, again, it all flows up to the publishers. So there are opportunities on the private side. So there are these, like most of the esports teams are privately owned. But for the most part, what we focus on is the public opportunity. And so if you want to get it on the public side, we say let's stick to the publishers.
Right. So esports for the publishers is both kind of a marketing opportunity as well as, new revenue potential,
Yes.
new channel for revenue potential.
Yes, sir.
Which is fascinating. And just quickly, because it's something I've read today, and you might be familiar with, Take-Two Interactive still going to release and actually increase the price of a console game. So just because we're talking about some new tech and cloud gaming and mobile, companies are still producing the consoles. And in some cases, like Take-Two, as reported, they may also be able to increase the price.
These companies are doing everything they can to stay diversified. One of the big risks that these companies face is single game risk or single channel risk. So if you're, and Take-Two is a company that is not as diversified as a company like Activision. So let's take a look at Activision. Activision has a huge mobile presence because they own King, which produces Candy Crush. So they're killing it on mobile, they're killing it on PC and console for a number of games. So then they have all these different games. They've got casual mobile games, they've got fantasy games, they've got shooter games, they've got multiplayer online role-playing games. They've got a ton of different games basically for everybody. If you think about the video game market, you think there's 1,000 people in the room. 200 people want to play sports games, 200 people want to play shooter games, 200 people want to play fantasy games, etc., etc. So these companies saying, I want to hit every one of those potential customers with a game they're going to want, and then they're going to keep them engaged. And then again, we're going to launch a free game, and then we're going to launch a normal $60, $70 game. And I really think Activision does the best at this because Call of Duty the Call of Duty franchise has been around since 2003 or 2004. So 16 years. They are still putting out new Call of Duty games, and it's still one of the most popular games in the world. So Activision was reluctant to get into the free-to-play game, but just this year they launched a free-to-play Call of Duty game. And what that does is it brings people into the Call of Duty ecosystem. I've been playing video games since I was 5 years old. I've never bought a Call of Duty game. I started playing that free game, and then 2 weeks later, I'm like, all right, I'll buy the full game. I bought the $60 game. I'd never bought a Call of Duty game. That's the kind of, it's just an anecdote, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Get people in the door for free, get them engaged, show them how fun the game is, and then you have the opportunity to cross-sell. It's like an ecosystem. They're trying to bring people in the door and they keep them in there. And they're doing it across all games, channels, consoles, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a good point, Ed.
Excellent. Let's move on to the next slide and talk about some of the supporting forces, the underlying long-term demographic trends that we see supporting video games, and in this case, in this example, eSports.
Yeah, I mean, the top chart is great. I mean, it's hard to wrap your mind around the idea that 500 million people are watching eSports this year. It's hard to conceptualize it, but the fact is this is not happening on TV. And it goes back to those three key ideas that I was talking about earlier. This revolution is not happening on TV. It's happening online. And it's happening on websites like Twitch and even YouTube and Facebook. YouTube and Facebook recently also launched their own gaming channels. And what people are doing is they're going online into those ecosystems and they're watching each other play video games, and it's a social media event. So the live streaming situation, it combines elements of the video, which is everybody's normal, like YouTube. The old YouTube is like, online video 1.0, right? You make a funny video with your friends, you upload it to YouTube, and that's it. And then people want to comment on it or whatever. Now, it's not uploading something that's already happened. You're turning on your webcam, it's running live, and then there's a chat room off to the side. And literally some of the top streamers, I'm talking about 50 to 60,000 people in the chat room at the same time watching these big name streamers. And so that's the kind of thing that's supporting the esports audience growth, is because everybody's hanging out online. Oh, the new Overwatch, the Overwatch finals are coming on. Everybody's watching it online. And I think, who is this audience? A lot of people would say, well, it's just a bunch of 12-year-olds who don't have any money, or it's just a bunch of, but that is not the case. the average age for your esports fan is in their late 20s, 28 to 30. So what is a person, and these are not people who live in their parents' basement and don't have jobs. These are people with jobs who have disposable income, and what are they spending their time, their entertainment time doing? They're spending it hanging out online and playing video games. And I think that's a really common misconception that I love to hammer over the head, is because, look, I'm 37 years old. I'm not like the biggest video game guy in the world, but I got my first Nintendo when I was 5 years old. And it's come and gone over the years. But, you know, I play video games semi-regular. And I think a lot of people in my demographic, and then as you go down, you know, when you talk about a 40-year-old and all the way down to an 18-year-old, video games are a part of your daily life. And even if somebody's a stick in the mud and they're saying, well, I'm not playing video games, I don't like them, whatever, that's fine. 9 out of 10, you know, 8 out of 10, or everybody else, they are playing video games.
And perhaps we can talk a little bit more about the characteristic of this demographic, the younger esports demographic. One being a cord-cutting audience. You're one of those. I don't think you said you've never had a cable subscription before, but this demand for more online, more interactive content. These video game multiverses are destinations for people.
Definitely. So Fortnite is just a huge innovative game, and the people behind Fortnite Epic, they are really pushing the envelope in terms of what is possible. Here's what I mean. So there have been a number of concerts. The most recent one was one of the biggest ones in the last couple of months is the Travis Scott concert. Travis Scott is a very famous rapper. I'm pretty sure he's Kylie Jenner's husband. Side note. So they had this huge event where you join the Fortnite game, you log onto the game, and you say you want to go to the concert. Sure, we'll go to the concert. So then you're not playing the normal game, but you're in this. Basically, it's like a music video. So the star of the show, the rapper, he was literally like 100, 200 feet tall, and he's stomping around the game. And there's music blasting, and you're just in this concert. It's an interactive experience. You're hanging out with your friends, listening to this experience, and it goes away. It's not like replayable. So it's like if you're not there for that moment, it's just like a live concert. If you missed the YouTube concert last night at the Dome or whatever, you can't ever recreate that experience because that night is over and it's not coming back. So Fortnite is really trying to create these irreplaceable moments that you have to be there to experience it. And one more thing they're doing too is they're actually showing movies. So a couple weeks ago, they showed the movie Inception, which is funny and very ironic because that's a very kind of weird meta movie too. So you log into the Fortnite, and then you're looking at your character, and he's moving around, and then it's like a drive-in movie where they have this huge screen in the game, and it's the movie Inception is playing within the game. And the only way you can watch it is you have to log into your Fortnite, and you're watching a movie inside of a game, and that's the kind of it's like science fiction level stuff, and that's the future. And I think later this summer, there's a new James Bond movie coming out next year. The world premiere for the new James Bond movie is going to be happening inside Fortnite. So if you want to watch James Bond premiere when it comes out for the first time, you have to have Fortnite. You have to go in and watch it. So that is what we're talking about here. Great.
And then, so let's talk about the investment opportunity, or how you get access to this universe, this industry of video gaming and esports. If we go on to the next slide, the index that underlies our various ETFs, we have a US ETF and a UCITS-based ETF, is built around a couple key principles. One, it's global, as is this industry. This industry is global, and so we want an index that reflects that opportunity. So it's a global index. It only includes companies that generate more than 50% of its revenue from video gaming or esports. And that's key for us. That we call that a pure play because most of its revenue and its economic viability come from this space. And then Also, we look for companies that are large enough and have enough trading volume. We're targeting publicly listed companies. And since we're putting them in a portfolio, we want that portfolio as an ETF to have good trading characteristics. So we look for large liquid companies that help the ETF have better trading spreads and a more efficient trading style for investors. The 50% rule in the case of video gaming and esports, in the case of this index, is interesting because there are some big names in the video game space that just don't make it into the index. A company might be like Microsoft that has Xbox, or Sony because of PlayStation. JP has mentioned Twitch is a big streaming platform which is owned by Amazon. Those are owned by conglomerates, which generate much more of the revenue from other parts and other industries. And so for our perspective, if you're an investor looking to add to a core portfolio, looking to add some diversification and return enhancement potential to a core portfolio, you want something that's going to be differentiated. And you likely already have exposures to some of these big names like Microsoft, Sony, and Amazon. So that's how we believe that an index should be created, particularly for thematic. You want that distinct, differentiated performance. But what you end up having in the index are large allocations to names that are highly involved in this space. And perhaps for this space, some of the largest allocations in a fund structure for companies such as Activision, Nintendo, Tencent. NVIDIA and AMD are interesting because they are hardware companies. They make the chips that power the cloud systems, for instance. So they are part of the ecosystem. They do break out their revenues, and they do qualify for having generated more than 50% of their revenue from this space. And yeah, I mean, so that's what you end up with is a nice global portfolio of publishers, hardware makers. I think in time you'll see more of the streaming platforms as well.
I'll just add to what this methodology and this philosophy provides is the targeted exposure, and you can see that when you run like a comparison of this portfolio versus a broad benchmark. There's very, very, very little overlap. If you compare this strategy or this index compared to the S&P 500, only 1.5% of the portfolio is overlapping. If you compare it to the MSCI ACWI index, the all cap world index, same thing, 1.8%. So this is a differentiated strategy providing targeted exposure, and it is a portfolio diversifier in a lot of ways because the correlations compared to the broad indexes, and even if you compare the correlations of this index to some of the sectors where the companies come from, it's much lower than you would expect. And you see correlations in the mid to high 50s, and maybe even a low 60 here or there. So much lower than you would expect, especially given the performance. And we haven't really dug into the performance here because we're not trying to push on that. But the performance since we've launched the index or since we launched the ETF has been exemplary. The ETF is outperforming the broad market by 35-40% this year. And last year, when the broad market was S&P was up 30% last year, the ETF and the strategy was up 40%. So it's not like it's some kind of safety play that only happens in the down year. The strategy was up bigger than the market when the market was up 30%. And then we all know how crazy this year has been. And these companies are just uniquely positioned. And I think there is a reason for that outperformance, and the reason that these companies are doing so well. It's because this is a group, and all the stuff I've talked about today, this is a group of forward-looking companies that is looking to the future, and they're looking at what's going on in society and how people are using entertainment and how people are connected with each other, and they're kind of sitting right in the sweet spot, and they're doing all these really innovative, cool things, and it's bringing people into the fold. And it's bringing video games. It's further like letting the feelers and the vines of video games are just continuing to grow into the fabric of our society. And I think that is why you see, the kind of performance that we've seen over the last couple of months. I don't know, maybe Ed, you want to hum a few bars about, that interest and stuff that we've seen?
Well, yeah, what I can do, if we go on to the next slide, I can just introduce the funds that we've launched. In 2018, we launched VanEck Vectors Video Gaming and Esports ETF, ticker symbol ESPO, that tracks the VanEck tracks the MVIS Global Video Gaming and Esports Index. There is also we also launched a UCITS version, also with the ticker ESPO in 2019, about a year ago. And to date, between the two of them globally, we've raised over $800 million in assets. Actually, the UCITS version actually is larger than the US one right now at 460 million. The US is about 350 million in assets. And we've continued to see great interest in this space. I think perhaps initially because of the novelty of video gaming and the novelty of going to watch people play esports. But I think as investors have learned more about the space, have seen the potential investment opportunities there. Both ETFs are priced at a total expense ratio or net expense ratio of 55 basis points. And we're happy to talk to you about the structure, about the ETFs, and at this point we can probably open it up to questions or turn it back to Bise.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Ed. Sorry, I was my microphone on off. I was very excited reading all the questions we received from our audience. I think we have some guys there that are very engaged with the industry. Some of the questions we have are showing that during this presentation, we have a lot of, a question on the business model, what is coming for the future. So it's many questions on that. And I will start and maybe pass you on the technology side where we see, all this connection issue. Just to have the landscape nowadays, the pandemic is getting all guys in house, and the connection is one of the issues here, at least in Chile. So what are the new challenges technology will provide support from this business looking forward?
Well, I think so. Like we saw, I'm not 100% familiar on the connection issues that are going on in Chile, but that the interconnectivity on the online gaming community has grown from, back when I was a teenager, what people used to do was literally take their PC computers, lug it over to somebody else's house, and then they'd set up these huge LAN parties. So so you had to basically connect your computer to each other. So there'd be 5 or 6 computers connected directly to each other, and that was how people played the game. So it was essentially off the internet. As the internet speeds have gotten better and better and better, that has allowed the games to become more complicated, more complex, and it has allowed people to play each other online. Lag is always an issue. Everybody hates lag. So you could think of when the Google Stadia launched last year, that was one of the big things that really people were picking on. They're saying, look, if you move if you push your controller and it takes your character like 15 milliseconds or 25 milliseconds to move, it creates this disconnect in your brain, and then you get taken out of the game, right? So the issue of lag and connectivity and basically instant reaction time in the game is really front and center for these companies. So I think that's more of an infrastructure question, right? And I think as a society, as a global society, we are moving towards faster connectivity and lightning speed reaction times. And I think 5G, the coming 5G rollout that we've been hearing about for the last number of years, is going to address some of those questions. Because I'm not a 5G expert. I just know that these companies are really kind of banking on the fact that when 5G gets here, the connectivity is even going to go higher and higher and better. So I think that's more of an infrastructure question and more of I'll tell you what, the publishers and the game companies, that is a top concern for them, and from a broader industry perspective, connectivity, speed is a huge thing too. So I think it's just going to be, the games are going to keep getting faster and faster, and the connectivity is going to keep getting better and better. So
good.
That would be my answer to that.
Thank you, JP. One of the things you mentioned before is this game as a service, where you can, work and have a lot of entertainment online. So there's any challenge in terms of the hardware industry, where now you may not need a very robust or high computer. So this move and shift a little bit the X of the the development, and what are the challenges for the hardware industry in this regard?
I think that's so when Google Stadia, so that we're talking about cloud computing and how the chip makers are going to survive in a cloud computing environment. Who do you think is going to make the chips for the cloud? It's the chip makers, right? Like when Google announced that they said we're going to have Google Stadia, it's going to be amazing, it's going to be this amazing cloud gaming experience, they said, and AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, is going to be the chip maker who defines the customer experience. So these companies, AMD, NVIDIA, et cetera, they already have ongoing back and forth collaborative relationships with the cloud, the cloud companies or the developers, right? AMD, AMD makes the chips that go in the Xbox already. So AMD's already working with Microsoft. And so it's not just the companies that are in this index. I think the broader industry, the chip makers, and in my opinion, it's a very forward-looking industry. And if any company is going to benefit and do profit and succeed and thrive in a cloud world, it's a chip maker, because they're the ones who are, the engine or the guts of the whole operation. So yeah, it's good for the chip makers, because they're in business. You look at the performance of the big chip companies. It's a very positive outlook for them. That's where our society is going.
Great. You mentioned during your presentation, JP, about this new business model where people can download the game or play the game, for free basis, and as you mentioned, all the fan bases are, waiting for the new release. So how deal with all this challenge with many or saturation of free games, where a lot of people is coming, everyone want to have their own league on table. So if you can elaborate on that, what are your thoughts about this, a huge free games coming to market?
I think that it's not a problem for the publishers. I think that they're using it as a new means to get people in the door, and I think there's something for everybody out there in the gaming community. Like I said earlier, if you get a room full of 1,000 people, 200 are gonna like this kind of game, 200 are gonna like this kind of game, and on and on and on. So the publishers are launching free games to target each one of those segments. So sure, like a great example of this is Amazon. Amazon released their first AAA game for free called Crucible in the last couple of 2 months or so. They didn't support it on the marketing effort. They didn't really give it a lot of advertising, and nobody's playing the game. And they've kind of retreated. They didn't close. Amazon's not going to close up shop and walk away from an opportunity like that, but they tried to launch this game. It didn't really catch on, and it's just like, okay, on to the next one, right? There's another one coming down the line. And I think Apex Legends is a great example of that. EA is a huge third-party publisher. They've never gotten into the free-to-play game until last year. They launched this game called Apex Legends. It was a surprise game. Nobody knew it was coming. They launched it, and now that game is going to be projecting to make EA $400 to $600 million a year off of a free game. So if publishers and the gaming community as a whole, they see a game come out for free and it has the potential to turn into a $500 million a year revenue, they're going to keep trying to launch those games, right? And if something flops, like Crucible flop for Amazon, there's nothing you can do. On to the next one, right? And that's the whole thing. They need to stay diversified. You cannot keep all of your eggs in one basket. And I'll throw out a question that we get a lot. I'll throw out a question and the answer is, what are the risks that these publishers face? What are the risks that are inherent in this business? And one of the main ones is single game risk or single channel risk too, which is like, I've got all my eggs in one basket, right? I've got this game. It's coming out next year. It's my moneymaker. Every time I release it, every 5 years, it makes us, $1.5 billion. But for whatever reason, the one that you just, this upcoming game, let's say there's development problems and it gets delayed for 6 months. Let's say it gets released and nobody likes it, nobody plays it. That publisher, if he has too much revenue coming from that game, the stock is gonna suffer. So what do? They're aware of this risk, and that's what they diversify. They want as many games as they can going at the same time. The other risk that's out there in the market right now for these companies is regulatory risk. So we saw regulatory risk. Regulatory risk is when the government basically comes in and says, you guys used to be able to do this, you used to be able to sell this kind of game, you're not allowed to sell that kind of game anymore. If you sell it, we're going to fine you, you're going to get in trouble. So then the game company can't publish that game or whatever, for whatever reason. So China, if you want to release a new game in China, the Chinese government has to rubber stamp it and say, okay, you're allowed to release this new game. So in 2018, the Chinese government said, no more new games are being released. I don't care who you are, you're not allowed to release a new game. And what that did was any company that had a lot of exposure to the Chinese consumer market really got dinged that year. And it was the new releases were closed from March to about December. So the old games are still out and still being able to be played, but there were no new releases. So another example of regulatory risk is loot boxes. So loot boxes is a form of in-game purchase. It's basically like a roulette wheel, where you spend $5 and you have this treasure chest, and the treasure chest is either going to have a really cool sword or kind of like a mediocre sword, right? So so there's like probability that you're going to get the cool sword 5% of the time. So people will spend money. They'll spend like $100, $200, $300 trying to get the cool sword. So in the European Union, they view that as a form of gambling, and they think that kids, like children, are going to become addicted to gambling because they're spending money on these loot boxes. So Belgium in particular said, no more loot boxes, not allowed. So the companies said, okay, we're not going to sell loot boxes in Europe anymore. No big deal. The companies are very aware they need to be on the right side of the law. They're not trying to go, it's not the Wild West. They can't just go out there and do whatever they want. So the companies they have lobbyists and lobbyist organizations, and they're trying to stay ahead of any kind of regulatory risk. They're super aware of it, and they try to stay on the right side of the law because they want to be doing business. They want to be selling their product to consumers without worrying about the EU, Brussels coming down and dropping the hammer on them. So
good, great. Another question regarding how the shift in terms of the entertainment. So we have one question asking about if there are any change between traditional competition that are changing from this new esport, where maybe not longer we have a huge audience in one place. So do you see a shift in terms of the audience on the traditional competition to the esport industry?
I'm not sure I fully heard your question, but I think I did. You're asking about are there going to be live events? Do there need to be live events? Is it going to go away? Is that the basic gist of the question?
Yeah. How is it the change between traditional competitions with all these?
I got you.
To the new industry. So
you compare esports with traditional sports. Traditional sports, everybody, you got packed stadiums. And I think when we launched the fund 2 years ago, that was one of the big things we like to talk about. There was, in New York City, they had the finals of the Overwatch League the first year. And the Barclays Center, which is a huge arena in New York, was sold out 2 nights in a row, 20,000 people. I was looking at tickets online. The tickets were like $400 or $500 just to get in the door. So there is a huge demand for some of these live events. League of Legends also can fill stadiums of 30,000 people watching League of Legends. However, in my opinion, the real value add for esports and this form of entertainment is the online interactive streaming ecosystem. That is where the money is. That is where the big media rights are. And because, it's fun to go to watch a live match and scream your head off, but also, that's one of the benefits. People want to be at their house. They want to be watching online and participating in the chat room and hanging out with each other, as this is happening. So one other question we get too, once the once sports come back, is esports going to go away, right? Because we saw like earlier this year when sports were really canceled, you know, the esports were still going, and NASCAR, for example, set the world record for TV viewership for the NASCAR race. There were like over 1 million people watching NASCAR, and the guys are literally in their living rooms racing their cars, you know, in the game, and there's 1 million people on TV watching it. So the question is, once COVID goes away, once football comes back, you know, once baseball comes back, is esports going to go away? And my answer is no, right? It's probably going to have a little pullback, but I would equate it to Zoom or like what we're using now, Microsoft Teams, right? It's just accelerated the adoption. Like once we all go back, like let's say in a year or 2 years, we all go back to the office and we're all back at work in the normal setting. We're still going to be using Zoom, and we're still going to be using Microsoft Teams, right? We're just not going to be using it all day, every day, every single day. That's all we do. So it's still there, but what we've seen is the timeline of user adoption really collapse. So I see esports in the same way. Once things comes back, sure, it's going to have a little pullback, and you know the guy who wanted to watch live soccer is going to be going to watch live soccer or football, as you call it. But it's not going away, and we've created a new high watermark, and I think that's what's exciting.
Great. I just want to share with you guys that one of the audience, I think, has a lot of knowledge about this esport. He mentioned that within 3 hours of game, you can burn 500 calories. So it's like maybe a new sport as well. So you have the entertainment, but also, you know, the shape and the physics. So it's very nice to have all the insights you share. If we instead to see what is going on nowadays, what is the new technology or the new development looking forward? What is the future? I mean, it's a very hard question because, as you mentioned before, GP is like this type of movie on the science fiction because you are reshaping the future. So. But if you can elaborate a little bit on that, what is the expectation? What is the, thinking about?
So think about a timeline. So the last 10 to 15 years, what came out, what everybody's working on is mobile. So now think about 25 years ago, if you said there's going to be a little thing in your hand, it's going to be a little black screen, you're going to be able to zip around on it, and you're going to have internet, you're going to have maps where you can walk around and you have a map telling you exactly where you are anywhere in the world. And you can talk to your friends holding the phone in your face, and you're just having a video conference with your friend who lives in a different country, and the price is what, $50 a month or whatever it is. It's mind blowing. So now they're working on the cloud, so where it's going to be like, I don't need an Xbox. I could just log onto the internet and play a crazy, amazing game for $10 a month. You know, 10, 15 years out, that's going to be a reality. Or 10 years out, cloud gaming is going to be like, yeah, cloud gaming, it's no big deal. 15, 20, 25 years out, I mean, who knows? You know, who knows? We were talking before the call, you know, there's technology where there's TV screen, there's a TV screen, it's as thin as a piece of paper, and you can fold it up and crumple it up and then reopen it again, and it's a TV. Your wall is going to be a TV. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the movie Her, with Spike. It's a Spike Jonze movie with what's his name? Joaquin Phoenix is in it, and it's set in basically 50 years in the future. And there's a scene, I love the scene. He's sitting on his couch, and his TV, or his whole wall is a TV, and he's playing a game. And he's sitting on the couch, and his character is moving around, and he's using his fingers like this. He's playing a game with his fingers in the air, right? And we've seen a little bit of that with things like the Microsoft and PlayStation have both come out with things where it's like you hold a wand, and it's kind of like virtual reality where you're in the thing and you're holding the wand or you're moving, or the Wii Fit is another example where they've got this bar that sits on your TV and you move and it dances, your character dances, right? So I mean that's already out. So fast forward 20, 25 years, read a science fiction book. That's what it's going to be like, you know, unless there's some kind of like, you know, huge disaster that wipes out the human population. But that's where we're going. It's really hard to understand where we're going to be because, we're also consumed with, getting through the day and, doing work in our daily lives. But there are people in the video game industry and the broader tech industry who are pushing the envelope into what is possible. And that, again, goes back to why this is such a cool industry is because, and why I think these companies are doing so well is because people are beginning to realize that this is not going away. this is where the future is heading. And there's another movie called Ready Player One, where everybody sits. Ready Player One is another good example.
Yeah.
So if you want to get into where we're going, just pick up a science fiction book, and that's where we're going.
Thank you, John. We are just 1 minute left, and quick question on Ed in terms about the funds. We are discussing about all this industry, but also the VanEck eSport gaming ETF. So Ed, if you can tell us where is a little bit information about the funds, the alternative for investment. So in a couple of.
Yeah. Well, first off, we had the U.S. Domiciled fund, ticker symbol ESPO, traded or has a net management fee, 55 basis points. We also have a UCITS version of it, also ticker symbol ESPO, a number of different countries that it's registered in, but also total expense ratio, 55 basis points. As a UCITS, it is full replication. The income treatment is a reinvestment income treatment for that product as well. And both ETFs track the MVIS Global Video Gaming and Esports Index based on that basic methodology that we highlighted earlier in the call.
Good. Thank you, Ed. So guys, thank you very much, John and Ed, for this very interesting and exciting presentation. There's so many news and new stuff that we are seeing that we very appreciate your timing here. We have many questions on the chat. I think we will definitely go back to you with the answer of those questions. We really enjoyed the presentation, and having said that, I want to thank you, all of the audience, all of our clients that are joining us this morning. And if you could, as Carlos mentioned at the beginning, click in the QR code to give us feedback. So it will be great for us to improve and have better feedback on your ideas. So thank you very much. Hope you see you soon. Que esté muy bien. Muchas gracias a todos. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Had a great time. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.